Okay, Be'ezus Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Nun Aleph, number 51, and here we go. So we're discussing over here. The topic today is the Chavite Kohen Gadol. It's a pasuk in Parshas Tzav. We'll read it pretty soon, and here it on the screen where the Torah says, "Vaydavar Hashem Moshe Lema Zeh Korban Aaron V'Vonav Ashekrivu Hashem B'Yom Himashach Chaysa." So basically, it's saying that Aaron and his kids, the day they're inaugurated, they have to bring a special mincha. Aaron had to bring this mincha every single day. Aaron, the Kohen Gadol. You take Asiris Ha'efa, like about half a gallon, a little more than a half a gallon of flour, right? Tamid. And they makrav it half in the morning, half in the night. So, and then the Torah tells you, fry it also, okay? And bake it. So how do you fry it and bake it? So here is the picture. Basically, after kneading it with oil, after kneading the flour with water, they mix it with oil. Now you have another process. Once the flour has oil in it, they scald it with hot water. Then they bake it, as you see on the right side of your screen. And then after they bake it, they fry it on a pan, a flat pan. And then they fold it over. And they made 12 of these matzahs, like, matzahs that you could fold over. 6 of them they brought in the morning on the Mizbeach. That means they brought it close to the Mizbeach, they salted it, and they burned it on the Mizbeach. None of it was eaten by the Kohen Gadol. And then 6, matzahs were brought in the evening time. Machzisa be'boker, machzisa be'erev. And that's what we learned so far. Now, the Torah tells you to bake it and fry it. So which came first? In our picture, it says baking it and then frying it. But let's see what the Gemara says. Itmar, we learned. Okay, we're starting from Daf Mem Tes Amid Beis. Itmar, a couple of lines from the bottom. Itmar, we learned. Chavite Kohen Gadol, Ketzad Oisa Noisa. How did you make the matzahs of the Kohen Gadol? Chia Barabo Am Rabbi Yochanan Oifa. You bake it first. Va'achar kach betagno, and then you fry it. Ba'asi Amar Am Rabbi Chanina betagno ba'ach kach oifa. First you fry it and then you bake it. Am Rabbi Chia Baraba Kvasi Didi Mistavra. I am correct. You bake it first, then you fry it, because the Torah tells you to funei. It should be baked. What does it mean to funei? What is the nun? To make sure when you bake it, the flour is beautiful, which means it was never fried or burnt before that. So that's why you bake first and then you fry. I think I'm correct, because you know what tufune means? You bake it when it's half roasted. No doesn't mean beautiful, but it could also mean, don't be half roasted. So it's to be like partially the process started by frying it first and then you bake it. But the Gemara says kitanoy, it's a machlokes tanoim. It's not just a machlokes amoraim. Tefune teofne no. The Tanakama holds you bake it you fry it first. Rabbi Yomer teofeinu no. You bake it first. Rabbi Doisa Oimer, it's supposed to be Rabbi Doisa. He holds you do in between. Teofne Rabba, you bake it twice. Islay First, you're gonna bake it without frying it. Then you fry it, and then you rebake it. So then you have the both interpretations of no. It's baked beautifully, and it's baked after it's been roasted. Says the Gemara, Tanan Hasu. We learned over there. Chavite Kohen Gadol. These matzahs of the Kohen Gadol. Liyushasam varichasam v'afyasam b'fnim v'deichas Shabbos. You bake it all, you prepare it all in the Beis Hamikdash. It's not like you prepare it in a bakery outside the Beis Hamikdash. You prepare it in the Beis Hamikdash. And the key here is that it overrides Shabbos. You walk into the Beis Hamikdash and they're baking these breads on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, how do I know that you could bake this matzah on Shabbos in the Beis Hamikdash? Rav Huna tifunei teafeinu no. The Torah tells you bake it beautiful. Now, the afilei me'esmol, if they baked it on Friday in shefele, then by the time Shabbos comes around, it got bloated. So, and the Torah tells you that when you bring it on the Mizbeach, it should be beautifully baked. That means freshly baked. So it's mashma that you have to even bake it on Shabbos. Maskef lo Rav Yosef Amid the Kovish Lebiyarka. Maybe the Torah is telling you that it has to be, you can bake it on Friday and preserve it, let's say, in a saran wrap, or in their time of the Chazal, to preserve baked goods, they would wrap it with a vegetable. You wrap it with a piece of kale, and somehow the bread will not stale. And says the Gemara, so they have another pasuk. They have the Beirab Shmuel Tonet Te Aseh Ba'afila b'Shabbos Te Aseh Ba'afila b'Tumah. The Torah tells you in the Psukim Te Aseh. Where does it say Te Aseh? Al Machavas Hashemen Te Aseh. You see right over here. Te Aseh. Do it no matter what, even if you have to bake it on Shabbos, even if you bake it B'Tumah, Makrav it B'Tumah, you just make sure it's done. Abaya says, Omakra, the pasuk says, I have another pasuk that you do it on Shabbos. Soilis mincha tamid. The Torah compares the mincha of the Kohen Gadol like a regular carbon tamid, that you bring on, and arei minchas tamidim. This mincha is like a regular carbon tamid, just like a regular carbon tamid is brought on Shabbos. Oilas Shabbat b'Shabbatoi al oilas hatamid. The Torah tells you bring the carbon tamid on Shabbos. You shecht it on Shabbos. So also you bake this thing on Shabbos. You bake this mincha on Shabbos. Rava says, al machavas, malamich tunik keli. Really, you don't even need any pasuk. Torah tells you fry it on a pan like this. If you're frying it on a pan, this pan is a klisharis. Once something touches a keli belonging to the Beis Hamikdash, then the matzah cannot be overnighted. So therefore, by derivation, it cannot have been baked from Friday, because if you're going to bake it from yesterday, from Friday, if salei belina, it was overnighted, it becomes pasal belina. Tanya kavasi Rava amachvas malamich tuna bekeli. A brisa that supports Rava, that the real reason why it wasn't baked on Friday is because the Torah tells you when you fry it, use a machavas, which is a type of klishares. And if it needs a klishares, then automatically you cannot keep it around overnight. You can't store it. Okay, now the Gemara is now moves into another discussion. I said that it has to have oil, right? You mix the flour here with oil. First, you knead it with water, right? And then you mix it with oil. Now, the question is, how much oil do you need? So we can see on the picture over here, some isarin, some minchas need 3 bottles of oil, 3 lugin of oil. And some only need 1 lug of oil. So what is the minchas chavitin? Is it need 3 lugs or just 1 lug? That's the question of the Gemara. So the Torah tells you, Bashemin, add oil to this mincha. The Hoysef Lashem, and you add oil. So it's more oil than a regular carbon mincha. That's what it means. So so I don't know how much oil you're supposed to put in there. Shemen. It says by over here, it says shemen, and it says by any carbon, when you bring an animal as a carbon, let's say you brought a carbon oila, you brought a mincha. It also says the mincha that went along with the carbon. And then it says, when you make that mincha, put oil in it. Malahan, just like over there, shloishes lugin lisarin. You put 3 lugin for 1/10 of an ephah. Again, for like a gallon, a half a gallon of flour, you put 3 lugin, right? Afkan shloishes lugin lisarin. So also by the minchas chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, you put 3 lugs for every 1/10 of an ephah of flour. So that's the proof. So the Gemara says, the Brisa continues, I could say the opposite. It says oil over here, and it says when somebody wants to donate just a mincha, not an animal as a carbon, but he just wants to donate a mincha, there you put 1 bottle of oil into the flour. So also over here, maybe you put only 1 bottle of loig into the oil. So I have a choice. where to learn our minchas chavitim, from a minchas nesachim, the minchas that's brought with an animal, or a minchas nedava if someone donated a minchas nedava, where there you only need one bottle of oil to the flour. So the Gemara says, the Brisa continues, let's see who it's compared to. Dan and tabash to tabash. Tader boin chayva doiche Shabbos doiche tuma. The ain danim tabash b'shein tabash. What this means is it's more likely that if you have a choice to compare minchas chavitim, I'll compare it to a minchas nesachim. Why? Because both a minchas nesachim comes often. It's doiche Shabbos, and it's doiche, it overrides tuma. So therefore minchas nesachim is a mincha. The right comparison for a mincha of a kohen gadol is to compare it to a minchas nesachim. Again, once the minchas nesachim needs 3 lugin, so also the mincha of the kohen gadol needs 3 lugin. So the Gemara says, "Oy kalach derzu." Let's compare it to a regular mincha. Done in yagel miyagel. Yagchid beglal atzmai. It's one thing. It's the minchas nedava is brought by an individual because of his own volition. It needs levina. And the minchas kohen gadol also needs levina, frankincense, whereas a minchas nesachim does not need frankincense. The einen dainin yagel misheni yagel, and I'd rather not learn minchas chavitim to minchas nesachim, which doesn't have the same commonalities as a minchas nedava. So the Gemara is basically saying that I'm checkmate over here. Why? Because I don't know if you should compare our minchas chavitim to a regular minchas nesachim, which needs 3 oils, 3 lugim, and there's some commonality between minchas chavitim and minchas of a nesachim, or compare it to a regular minchas nedava where it needs only 1 bottle of oil, and there are some commonalities where minchas kohen gadol is like a minchas nedava. So what do you do? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel ben Aisha ben Yochanan ben Yochanan Oimev soilas minchas tamid harei lechol minchas tamidim. Ma minchas tamidim gimel yisarin avzu gimel yisarin. Shmuel says, I have a pasuk that says that it's like a carbon tamid. Just like the carbon tamid, again, is you have 3 bottles, 3 lugin for yisarin. So also the minchas chavitin has 3 lugin yisarin. So in the pasuk it says soilas mincha tamid. You see, we're soilas mincha tamid. So it's like a carbon tamid. That's Rabbi Shmuel's reasoning. Rabbi Shimon, I met Riba Kan Shemen, Riba Minchas Kvasim Shemen. Malahal and Shleish Lugin Lisarin, Avkan Shleish Lugin Lisarin. Here, the Torah wrote the word Shemen, which tells you that you're supposed to add more oil than a regular donation mincha. So therefore, it's definitely compared to a Minchas Kvasim, which has 3 lugin for Nisarin, which has 3 bottles. Oy, klachla derazu, riba kam shem, riba minchas param be'elam shemem, malam shnei ksugin yisarin, avkan shnei lugin yisarin. But I could also compare it to the mincha that's brought for the minchas nesachim that's brought for a cow or a ram. There, for every isarin, you're going to bring 2 lugin. So maybe, perhaps, a minchas kohen, you should only bring 2 lugin for the isarin, not 3. So you could compare it to a sheep, or you could compare it to the minchas nesachim of a cow or a ram. Near Lamidaima, there's a commonality. Dona minchas haba yisarim, mincha haba yisarim, bein dona mincha haba yisarim, mincha haba beis v'gimel esrainim. It's more comparable to a mincha of a sheep, because the mincha of a sheep, you bring 1 isarim for the minchas nesachim, 1 pound, 1/2 gallon of flour. But for a mincha of a cow or a ram, there, for a cow, probably you bring gimel esrainim. You have to bring, 3 esrainim, or for a ram, 2 esrainim. Although it works out, for every isarin you're putting 2 lugim, but it's not compared to a minchas kohen, which only brings 1 isarin. So therefore, the Gemara comes to the conclusions for 2 different reasons. Why our little mincha of a kohen gadol, put 3 bottles of oil, 3 lugin of oil in there. Don't compare it to a minchas nedava where you put 1 bottle of oil, you put 3 bottles of oil. Fine. And the Gemara brought two psukim, one Rab Shimon, and one was Rab Shmuel ben Yishon Rab Yochanan ben Roika. Now, the Gemara is going to ask. I'm just going to point out. I'm going to run through this question and then go to the Mishnah. Gemara asked the question, Hagufa Kasha. Yeah, the Bryce itself has a little contradiction over here, because the Bryce starts off Bashemen. We see where the pink is Lahaisav Lashemen, that the Minchas Kohen Gadol had to have more oil than everybody else. Then how could the Bryce then go on? Maybe it should be like a regular mincha. But you just started the Bryce saying that the fact that the Torah wrote Bashemen, it indicates that you have to have more oil than just a regular minchas nedava. So that's the Gemara's question. Bashemen, Lahaisav Lashemen, how could I say that you compare it to a minchas nedava when the word bashemen means you're supposed to add on oil? So the Gemara gives three terutzim. Amar Abaya, Mantana bashemen, Lahishav Rab Shimoni. That is going according to Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon was the one that said the word bashemen means add more oil, but not everybody agrees to that. And even if it didn't say oil, and he was going back and forth. Maybe you don't need the word bashemen, but then the Gemara brings down another opinion of another pasuk of Rabbi Shmuel. So basically, it is Rabbi Shimon, but he's the author of the beginning of the Brisa, and then the Brisa continues on as Rabbi Shmuel asking questions against Rabbi Shimon. Okay, then the Gemara says, no, there's another way to learn the Brisa. It could be everybody's, the whole Brisa is Rabbi Shmuel. So basically, according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shua, the whole Brisa is Rabbi Shmuel Bnei Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, and he wanted to say originally that the word bashemen means add a lot of oil, but then he says maybe the Torah is telling you that you need to add oil in the first place, because I might think that the mincha of the Kohen Gadol is like a mincha of a sinner that doesn't add oil at all. So bashemen means you have to add oil. So then now I need a pasuk to tell me how much oil, and that's why Shmuel says that I have a pasuk that it's like a tamid. Rabba says, "Who Rab Shimon?" It's the whole Brisa is Rab Shimon. Okay, come on. Bashemen loisav lashemen. Dilak by Hashem like tzarach. Keeping the ksiv al machvas k'machves dam. Even and the Brisa is Rab Shimon. Even if it didn't say Bashemen, maybe I don't need Bashemen. Okay. So that ends that piece of the Gemara. So what you walked away from here is that you have two limudim, that a minchas Kohen Gadol has 3 bottles of oil. Either the Torah compares it to a mincha that's brought with a carbon tamid, which there you bring 3 bottles of oil for every Yisarei, or you have a pasuk. The pasuk says bashemen, add a lot of oil, more than a regular mincha of oil. So therefore, the best next thing to do compare it to is the oil amount that you add to the mincha of a sheep. Okay, new Mishnah, new topic. Loi minu koyin achatachtav mishal mi hoisa kreven. It's a beautiful question. If the Kohen Gadol died, the show must go on. They must bring that mincha every single day, even if they didn't elect a new Kohen Gadol. So who pays for that? Reb Shimon Aimer Mishal Tzibur. The Tzibur pays for that. Reb Yehuda Aimer Mishal Yorshim. The Yorshim, the inheritors of the Kohen Gadol that died, they pay until they elect a new Kohen Gadol. Ushleima Hoisa Kreva. But whereas when the Kohen Gadol is alive, you bring 6 and 6, right? Half in the morning, half in the night. But when there is no Kohen Gadol and it's just being paid for by the Tzibur or by the Yorshim, they bring all 12 chalas in one time. They bring it onto the mizbeach. They don't bring half in the morning, half at night. Says the Gemara Torah bottom. What's the source of that? Kohen Gadol shemeis. Let's say a Kohen Gadol died, and they didn't appoint another Kohen Gadol. How do I know that the Yorshim, the inheritors, they have to continue the show and they have to pay for those 12 challahs? Talmud Bavli, because the pasuk says, that the Kohen that takes over, that Kohen that's anointed, his children have to do it. What do you mean? The Kohen Gadol, so must be talking about, that pasuk is talking about if the Kohen died, then his children are just going to pay for it until they find another Kohen Gadol to take his place. And Yokol Yachriv Venel Lechutzayin, I would think you bring it in halves, 6 and 6. Talmud Loima Oisa, Yachriv Oisa, Kula V'Loi Chatzi, Div Rabbi Yehuda. That when the Yorshim are paying for it, they makriv it all at once, not half and half. So Rabbi Yehuda says, who pays for it? The Yorshim. Rabbi Shimon says that when the Kohen Gadol dies, who pays for it? Chok Olam. The Torah tells you that this Minchas Chavitim is Chok Olam, this pasuk, Chok Olam, that the Olam pays for it, that the Tzibur pays for it. And Kolol Tok there, it's totally burnt on the Mizbeach, Shtei Kula B'Aktara. When the Tzibur is paying for it because the Kohen Gadol died, then the whole thing is being burnt at one shot on the Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, V'hai Kohen Mashiach Lahochi Dasa. Do I need Kohen Mashiach to tell you that the Yorshim pay for it? Hai Miboyale, I needed to teach me another idea. L'chetetanya, like we learned in the Brisa. You see what the Gemara is going here and saying, I need this Kohen HaMashiach Tachtov to teach you another idea, that the Kohen Gadol has to bring this every single day. That's what this pasuk is teaching you. And every Kohen Gadol that replaces Aaron has to bring this every single day. Whereas a Kohen Hedyot, a Kohen, regular plain Kohen, the first time he's inaugurated as a Kohen Hedyot, the first day on the job, that's what he brings it, but not every day. So that's why it says Korban Aaron Avonav. So again, Kohen HaMashiach Tachta Mibonav Yasa Oisoi is teaching you something, and therefore, how do I know that it's teaching you the other idea that his children pay for it? That's the Gemara's question. Because I Kohen Mashiach Lahachudas, it's coming to teach you that idea. I needed to teach you what the Brisa said. I would think that Aaron and Bonav do this Minchas Chavitim only once in their lifetime. Torah tells you they are makriv. Aaron b'fnei atzmai, uBonav b'fnei atzmai. Zeh teaches me that Aaron brings this kohen, this Minchas Chavitim. And then the Torah tells you that every kohen brings this Minchas Chavitim. How do you split the two? Yes, every kohen brings this Minchas Chavitim the first day on their job. But Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, brings it every single day. Bonav Ele Kahanim Hedyotis. Maybe the Torah is telling you every Kohen Gadol brings it the first day on his job. But maybe Kohen Hedyot never brings it. The Kohen Mashiach Tachtav teaches you that every Kohen Gadol brings this Minchas Chavita. So why does it say the word Bonav, his sons? Even when they're not Kohen Gadol, when they're Kohen Hedyots, they are supposed to bring the first day on the job their Minchas Chavita. So again, if I need the Kohen Mashiach Tachta Mibonav Yasa Oisa to teach you that every Kohen Gadol, not just Aaron, but every Kohen Gadol who replaces Aaron has to bring the Minchas Chavitim every day, how do I know the idea that when the Kohen Gadol dies, his children have to pay for the Minchas Chavitim, even though there is no Kohen Gadol anymore? So the answer is the Gemara in Cain, Lichtav Mochmona, HaKohen HaMashiach Tachta Bonav Yaseh. My mi Bonav, Shamat Minei Tarte. Because the Torah wrote mi Bonav, it could have written that is the next Kohen Gadol does Minchas Kavitim, that then it says one of his from his children, mi Bonav, teaches you the second idea that when the Kohen Gadol dies, who pays for it? Mi Bonav. You go into the, to the children, and we force them to pay for the Minchas Chavitim. One more minute, and then we'll stop. Rab Shimon, Hay Oisamai Avadlei. Rab Shimon. So let's remember, Rab Shimon learned Chok Olam Kol Takta that the tzibur pays for it and that it's totally burnt in one shot. So what do you need the oisa for? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, bibanav means the children pay for it, and oisa is brought in one shot. But according to Rab Shimon, if you learn it from the second half of the pasuk, so what do you do with the oisa? So the Gemara darshins. Rab Shimon learns Oisa teaches you that if the Kohen Gadol died in the middle of the day, so the second Kohen Gadol takes over in the middle of the day, he can't use the Isarein that was the first Kohen Gadol that brought in the morning. He has to bring a whole new Isarein, and he's only makrav half of it. And that's what you learn from the pasuk. And you can't see that idea for Umach Tzisai because he doesn't darshan above. Rabbi Yehuda, now you have to ask the question, Hi Chak Olam, my Avadle. What does he do with Chak Olam? Certainly it doesn't teach you that the tzibur should pay for it because Rabbi Yehuda held that the children pay for it. And says the Gemara, Chukul Olam Tehei, that this is a law forever, that this mitzvah of Minchas Chavitim is forever generations, that the Kohen Gadol brings this every morning. Kolol Tokter Lamali, what does he do with Kolol Tokter? Here we finish. Look at the Tanya. And the Eliyah Minchas Koilol Bekolol Tokter. Koyin Minchas Koyin Head, but Loy Say Yochel. Nine lit in the Somer Shazeh, Bezeh, Vesomer Shazeh, Bezeh, Tamaloyme Kolol Kolol, Xera Shava. In other words, here Gemara concludes. The Torah tells you at the end another idea right over here at this last pasuk. The whole minchas koyim. Whenever a koyim brings a mincha, normally if a Yisrael brings a mincha, what happens? You do kemitza, and the kahanim bake matzahs with the extras, and they eat it. Here, if a koyim brings a mincha, kolel tiyeh, you just throw it onto the mizbeach. You're not allowed to eat it. How do you know? So now, how do you know that the minchas chavitim of a kohen gadol is not allowed to be eaten? And how do you know the other idea? How do you know a minchas kohen has to be totally burned? And that there's a mitzvah that it should be totally burned. So we have a gzeira shava, kolil, that whatever applies by a kohen hedya applies by the minchas chavitin, which means loy seichol will apply by the minchas chavitin, and the kolil tokel will apply by the minchas kohen. And that's how the Gemara ends off over here. And therefore, whatever applies by one applies by the other. So what you walk away now is just from our Mishnah is that if the Kohen Gadol died and there's nobody that took over, who pays that the show should go on? The tzibur pays for it. That's Rabbi Shimon's opinion, and Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that the Yorshim pay for it. But the show must still go on, and you should be aware that in the time of the second base of Migdash, it could be every 2 months the Kohen Gadol died for whatever reason. There was a lot of turnover, hundreds of Kohanim Gedolim, and there was always a lapse of time between the one Kohen Gadol and the next Kohen Gadol because it was sold for money. There was a lot of bribe your way into the position. So that's what our mission is discussing. Okay, we'll stop over here.